Hello everyone, my name is Cetta. This is my informative speech for my Communications 154 class. Imagine you're a young psychotherapist who is just taking a position at a penitentiary. You're very inexperienced, you're scared to death, and you have a young family to support. Well, this is the exact scenario that Dr. Robert Hare faced in 1960. He took a job at the British Columbia Penitentiary. He was isolated in this tiny little office with his only protection being this little panic button that he could push if he needed help. In walks his first patient, a man by the name of Ray, and lo and behold, he's wielding a knife, and he's not directly threatening the doctor, but he's waving it around and alluding to the fact that he'll use this knife. Now, Dr. Hare could have done one or two things: pushed the button and gotten help, or ignored the situation. And he chose to do the latter. He decided that if he had pushed the button, he would become a stool pigeon among the inmates, and they wouldn't trust him. They wouldn't come to him for anything. But this kind of backfired on the doctor because Ray was able to manipulate Dr. Hare and attain certain work details. And when he heard the doctor was leaving and having his car serviced, he got in the mechanics detail and cut the doctor's brakes and almost killed Dr. Hare's wife and child. And then years later, Dr. Hare ran into the same prisoner who was now released, which bewildered the doctor to begin with. And he was at a registration table at a college, and he overheard Ray say how he was the doctor's research assistant at one point. And when Dr. Hare caught his attention and said, Ray, and he said, "Hey, Doc," and kind of walked away. So this encounter with this man spurred 25 years of research that Dr. Hare conducted with a full team of researchers to comprise the psychopathy checklist to prevent prisoners from being released from prison that shouldn't be released from prison. And the doctor says that the problem with the tests that they were running before was that they were standard, so prisoners would get used to the test, especially those who were incarcerated numerous times. They would memorize it, and there was one prisoner he encountered who actually sold the test and would counsel other prisoners on how to get the desired outcome, whether it be a insane plea for a court case or a defense. So Dr. Hare decides that he's going to develop some system that's going to take care of this, and he used security footage, a prisoner's background, both family, social background, their time in prison, their crimes, as well as interviews, to conduct research to develop this checklist. And what he says is that psychopaths often have overinflated egos. They feel the world owes them. They worry about how they look. There was one prisoner named Jack who worried about how he appeared on the security footage. And he also boasted about himself, that he was a wonderful athlete. And this struck Dr. Hare as pretty funny when he said he wanted to be a professional swimmer because he was fat, 38, and in prison for life, and clearly not athletic. They lack remorse. They have no guilt towards their victims. Ted Bundy was quoted as saying that guilt was a mechanism that society used to control them, and it's very unhealthy for their bodies. Their remorse is short-lived if they have any at all. And there was one inmate that stunned Hare that had said that his murder victim had benefited from the crime by learning a hard lesson about life. And it's very common for a psychopath to turn a scenario onto the victim. They lack empathy. There was one woman who saw her daughter as a piece of property and allowed her boyfriend to sexually abuse this child. She was 5 years old, so that the boyfriend would leave her alone, that she didn't want to be bothered. So she thought this was the next best thing, and if she allowed this, the boyfriend would leave her alone. I was actually annoyed that the state took this child away because she belonged to her, and it was her property. They're very manipulative. They use anything they can to persuade parole boards, whether it's going back to school or joining a religious group. They are social deviant. They get very angry. They don't know how to control their anger. They often displace their anger. There was one inmate that was at a bar and didn't like the way a bouncer looked at him or smiled at him and beat the guy's head in and killed him and said he deserved it for making him mad. They like excitement and they love to break rules because they don't care about the consequences. They don't feel pain, so it doesn't bother them to be incarcerated. It really, they could care less. Children are an inconvenience very often, and there was one particular inmate that's just disgusting. Her name was Diane Downs, and she was convicted of shooting her 3 children, left, I believe, 2 dead or 1 dead. I know 1 in a wheelchair. But she did this because her alcoholic boyfriend didn't want kids, and she felt that it was better just to kill the kids to keep this guy. And she was also later quoted as saying that her kids were lucky that they were shot in a way to kill them because she has a scar on her body that she has to look at every day that reminds her of the shooting and of the crime. They often start these types of problems as a child. Jeffrey Dahmer beheaded dogs in his neighborhood and tacked them to chairs and trees. And that was a classic. I don't even know you how to be told that, but that's a classic sign of somebody who's going to have some future big problems, as we all know he did. Also, while conducting his research, he found out that psychopaths really only make up 20% of the prison population, that most of the psychopaths that we've probably encountered in our own lives are blue-collar psychopaths. They're out in society and they're fleecing old ladies and draining people's bank accounts. And that's kind of a scary thing. That's not to say they're going to go kill somebody, but they leave you destitute, or it's kind of just as bad. But he wrote a book called Without Conscience. It's really interesting. It kind of goes through the whole checklist. It gives you a sort of background on what to look for and what clinicians look for in order to properly diagnose these people. But they say that they think there's a problem possibly, which would kind of make sense, that there's a problem with a certain hemisphere of the brain, and that's why that these people don't have that on-off switch that says, hey, I shouldn't do this. I need to not do this. This is no good. They often, if they detect weaknesses in people, they will take advantage, and they will go after whoever they can to get the outcome that they're looking for. And today, Dr. Hare's psychopathy checklist is used worldwide in diagnosing these people, because the problem is a lot of them are paroled early, because parole boards are usually made up of people that are elected and not licensed clinicians that actually know what they're doing or can read or understand reports that are done by doctors. So today they use this checklist. It's used all over, and Dr. Hare is actually credited with helping the FBI solve numerous serial murder cases and rape cases and other criminal issues that he has helped solve. He also explains that if you become a victim of the psychopath, that you shouldn't feel guilty. It's not your fault. After all, these are bad people, and there are licensed people that they outsmart, including law enforcement. And a bit of advice: if you encounter one of these people, he says, just cut your losses. Don't try to change somebody. Don't try to make a bad situation better, because usually it's only going to get worse. And like I said, if you get a chance, read this book. When I first picked it up, I thought, here's another clinical book, but it was really, really, really interesting. And that's it. Thank you.